this is the part where I think it's important for us to note podcasting is voice, right? If you listen to your Google or your Siri or any of those different AI voices, you know that those are not human voices. There is so much more inflection and storytelling that can happen when you're a podcaster and getting your voice out there. So when it says that these are AI-powered podcasts, that doesn't mean that artificial intelligence has taken over those podcasts. Welcome to another episode of Listeners to Leads, where I'm helping podcasters launch and maintain a lead-generating show. I'm your host, Alicia Galati, the CEO and head podcast strategist behind Galati Media, a full-service podcast management company. On this show, you'll hear my guests and I discuss everything it takes to launch a successful podcast and keep it running. If you're ready to get leads, land speaking gigs, and create deeper connections with your audience through your podcast, then this is the show for you. Today on the podcast, we are going to be talking about podcasting and AI. What tools you should actually be considering for your podcast, which ones you should leave to the humans to do, and how to use these tools that are at our fingertips to make our podcasts better, more enjoyable, as well as to save us some time. Let's go ahead and start with what exactly is AI. Over the last few weeks, my husband has been watching a lot of the Terminator movies. That is not what AI is. AI is simply a type of computer technology that learns from the data that we humans put into it, and it enables that computer technology to make decisions, solve problems, and those kinds of things. We use AI every single day, especially if you're someone who uses a smartphone, who has a self-driving car. Even in the medical spaces, there are a lot of different things with AI now where you're able to get a diagnosis or at least get closer to a diagnosis by putting in information, and then AI is able to better cohesively let the doctors know, hey, this is what's going on, without having to explain it as a human and go further and longer than what we actually need to explain something. So here are some stats about podcasting and AI that I thought were really interesting. I got these off of podcastle.ai. AI-powered podcasts have grown 500% in the last year. Now, when I think about AI-powered podcasts, you might be thinking, oh, well, there's no way that AI is doing these podcasts, right? And this is the part where I think it's important for us to note podcasting is voice, right? If you listen to your Google or your Siri or any of those different AI voices, you know that those are not human voices. There is so much more inflection and storytelling that can happen when you're a podcaster and getting your voice out there. So when it says that these are AI-powered podcasts, that doesn't mean that artificial intelligence has taken over those podcasts. In fact, at my company, we actually use AI in a few of the different technologies that we use to produce our clients' episodes. Here are some of those ways that we can use AI to make our podcast better, to make it more efficient of a workflow, and to create a better product for our listeners. So some of the ways that we personally use AI at Galati Media is one, in our transcriptions. So we do have AI transcripts of our podcast episodes for clients to either hand over to an assistant or for them to get an idea of what was it in that episode that we actually talked about. Because sometimes the conversations can go in a different direction than what you might expect it to, right? So the AI versions that we use otter.ai, and that allows us to not only transcribe the episode, but it also has AI voice recognition. So if I were to go in there and upload one of my podcast episodes, it knows my voice and it knows, hey, this is Alicia Galati and this is what she said. We've also had it where some of our clients have had the same guests on their show, and they might be in the same industry or they might have been connected. And it will actually remember from the past episode when we said, hey, this voice is this person. It actually remembers that from the last episode and is able to think that for itself. So these are the different ways that AI can be used in podcasting, at least on like the transcription side right now is what we're talking about. Even beyond that, looking at Otter.ai again, we also have new features where they tell you, hey, at this timestamp, this is about what you guys were talking about. At this timestamp, I believe this is what you were talking about. And for the most part, a lot of that stuff is accurate and it pulls out the relevant information and those relevant kind of timestamps of this is a spot where the conversation might have shifted. And we're able to use that to create timestamps on the back end of Buzzsprout. Now, talking about Buzzsprout, this is another way that we use AI in podcasting, right? Buzzsprout is a podcast hosting platform, but they now have it where their dynamic content can not only be in the beginning of the episode, the pre-roll, or at the end of the episode as a post-roll, they also have it as a mid-roll. Now, they were doing this with their ads, and what it actually does is it goes through the episode and it determines where's the best place to put this ad. Now, this is fantastic, right? Because then it means that we as producers don't always have to go in and add something, then take it out, re-upload the episode. We can allow AI to support us in our podcasting ventures, right? Like, this is really incredible technology. And in no way is it replacing the thought of a human, right? Or even the human podcaster, but it's just going to make our lives a little easier and allow us to create more multifaceted content. Now, shifting over into content that leads me perfectly into the next segue, which is things like ChatGPT. Now, unless you're living under a rock, you probably know what ChatGPT is and how it has really taken the world by storm in the last few months. Now, the thing about ChatGPT is that I actually don't believe that we should be using this to create our content, especially from the podcasting side, right? When you're a podcaster, you have to create these voice inflections. You have to show your excitement and that you are passionate about what you're talking about. And you can't do that if you are simply reading off of a screen, right? And so even when I'm saying ChatGPT, you can hear that I'm like mentally trying to make sure that I say that correctly because I keep wanting to say ChatGPT. Which it's not that, it's ChatGPT. And so if I had to say, hey, ChatGPT, I'm trying to write a podcast episode about podcasting and AI. Some of the information that it would spit back out to me may be inaccurate. And it's our duty as podcasters and as podcast hosts to inform our listeners of correct information, right? I mean, we're not here to give our listeners incorrect information because these platforms like ChatGPT are using information that is given to them. The information that's coming back may not always be correct. And it's really important that we have that correct information, that we're using correct information when we are talking to our podcast listeners. We have a duty to them to, as content creators, to ensure that what we're saying is accurate. So I don't recommend using these types of platforms specifically for creating all of the content and every word that you're going to say. So we don't need to use these platforms to tell us exactly what we want to say to our listeners. We want to instead use it to generate ideas. Like, I think it is a great tool if you're like, you know what, I have no idea what I'm talking about in the next 6 months, and I'd like something to kind of jumpstart these ideas. I want to know what might be the next thing that I should talk to my audience about. What are the things that my audience is looking for? What are they needing to hear from me right now in my expertise? And while I really think that you should be talking to your audience about this, I do understand that sometimes you might be at the beginning stage of your podcast, or maybe you're just strapped for time and you're like, I need an idea today. So I do think that these resources are fantastic for that. Now, I don't think that you should have them write your show notes, Google has actually said that they are going to be viewing any blogs or content that is very clearly written by AI as spam and not accurate information. So it's important that we're able to infuse our voice into these show notes that we're writing, that we are actually putting in the effort to write them. Now, there are obviously ways that you can make this easier on yourself, like using resources like otter.ai to say, hey, what in the world did we talk about during this episode? Get those bullet points from there based off of the timestamps. It gives you a good general idea of what was talked about. Also, if you're looking for a way to maybe make your first sentence a little more SEO friendly, but then the rest of your show notes are definitely based on what your thoughts are, what the conversation is about, then maybe this is a good idea. We actually started using a AI platform called heyfriday.ai. Now, what we use it for, and it is good for SEO, it's good for figuring out how you want to title YouTube videos to make sure that they're SEO friendly. And not all, let me tell you, it is not always correct at all. So it's important that we as humans double check this information and make sure that what these AI computer programs are spitting out at us are actually accurate instead of just copying and pasting and being like, well, they told me it was this thing. Like, use our brains, right? So those are a few ways that we can use AI. The last one that I did want to mention that I think is definitely applicable to podcasters is on the production side. So when you are going through your audio, there are tons of software that have ways that they can learn to ensure that the audio quality is good. One of those we actually talk about in our next episode. I am joined by my video editor as well as now turning full-time producer, Sarah Connard, where we are talking about YouTube and podcasting. And this is really obviously a very hot topic right now, but we do mention Descript in that conversation when we talk about video editing. Also, Descript does do audio editing. So if you are wanting to just take out all those ums and you don't want to have to go back through the conversation, they will highlight them for you and remove them. And then you can go through and listen to the conversation without that stuff. It also ensures that if there's any room noise, so if I'm quiet for a few seconds, you'll hear maybe my computer running. You might hear the fan running outside of my office door. You might hear a car pass outside of my window, something like that. So those room noises that are just the air noises, it can listen to those and take out maybe those ums, but still create space so that the conversation still flows and feels natural without silencing them and instead using the room noise to do that. While we do not use Descript, at least at this point, we are considering it for supporting us in our video editing, even though we do have pretty good systems in place for that right now. But obviously, we're always looking for ways to improve and to streamline our processes. So one that we do use that is on the more expensive side for audio editing is Isotope RX9. They do have their different tiers available. We have their advanced tier, which is closer to $1,000 of a program. And I highly recommend them if you're someone who really wants to ensure that the audio quality is fantastic. So they can actually, you click on your repair assistant, it runs through the audio and it's able to clean it up pretty well. Now, we don't just stop there though. We listen to what the AI spit back out. And then we tailor it based on what we as podcast producers who have hours and hours and hours of doing this know about what we can tweak to make it better. So this is what I'm talking about when I say that we can utilize these tools, but don't let it completely take over how you are producing and creating a quality podcast. All right. That is all I really have to say about podcasting and AI, but I know that it's a hot topic right now, so I wanted to make sure that we touched on it. If you guys have any questions, thoughts, feelings, emotions about this, come hang out with me. You can send me a DM on Instagram or on LinkedIn. I like to hang out on both of those platforms, and I look forward to talking more about this topic with you guys. How are you using AI to produce your podcast? I want to know. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Listeners to Leads. If you found something in this episode valuable, I would really appreciate it if you shared it with a friend who you know would also get value from it. Want to send me a message? My favorite place to hang out is Instagram. You can find me at alicia.galati. Let me know what your favorite takeaway was from the episode. And don't forget, turning those listeners into leads is actually easy.